we never had downtime. Yeah, you had the same amount of downtime. The only difference was we scheduled.
All right, so welcome back, everybody, to the Uptime podcast. Today, I have the honor and privilege of having John Andersen with us, longtime industry expert to OEMs and dealers and the customers they serve, and to the tech industry that supports them all. So, John, thank you so much for joining us and joining me and for a chat today. And yeah, we'd love to start off and just maybe give the audience a little bit of more info about your background for those who aren't in the know.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation. For those of you who can see on video, I'm stuck in Central Florida where it's about 70 degrees and sunny outside. So apologize for any of the outside noise, but I just can't bear to be indoors right now. If you wanted to go back through history, I could chew up your whole podcast, but I'll try and make it short and sweet. About 35 years ago, along with three other fantastic partners, we started a little software company called PFW Systems. At the time, I think we were doing about $500,000 in sales. Over a 15 and 20-year period, we grew that up to let's just call it a very profitable company, profitable enough that it's been purchased by a number of other public companies on the way out. So I had the opportunity to, at that time, visit well over 500 individual dealerships, most of them ag and construction, majority of them being larger multi-store dealerships. And then, of course, we had to cultivate all the relationships that are required for interfaces and integration with all the manufacturers and the OEMs. My role's always been a little different. I'm a bit of my final title actually was chief evangelist, because my goal was to see the industry and the software continue to grow and continue to move. And there's a story there to be told about how people use software and what software's to be used like. It's not a wallet. It's not a big chief tablet and a number two pencil. We've come a long way from that, and probably more so. I'm going to say more so since I retired. You can see retirement is good with me as I knock off podcasts during the day and write articles at night. It really is frustrating now because there's a market and a market opportunity to grow, and the technology is changing so fast, and the majority of dealers, and when I say dealers, those could be outdoor power and equipment, they could be lawn and grounds care dealers, traditional ag heavy equipment distributors, lift truck dealers, over-the-road trucking dealerships, and of course, our traditional heavy equipment market. They all are pretty much in the same spot that they were 16 years ago. And when I look at what the software companies are doing, it's you're having to rely on outside plugins and add-ons and integrations and people to bolster what is a traditional software package, because the traditional software package basically is still a number two pencil and a big chief tablet. They're just doing the same thing that they've always done. So yeah.
And I think that's a great start to the conversation, John. I think one of the questions that I've had over the years for dealerships is, how do you shift from being a reactive entity to a proactive entity? And to your point, the technology has to support that, the process has to support that. I think one of the areas that's particularly challenging is in the product support arena. In your experience and the dealers that you've encountered, what do you see those major challenges for them being in that product support arena? Obviously, I've talked to previous guests on the podcast about technician shortage, but I guess what's the short list in your mind of how a dealer advances from being that reactive entity to being more proactive?
Well, I think I'm not sure that from a product support perspective that they really need to so much be proactive as they need to, because let's be honest, parts and service in the heavy equipment industry is always going to exist. It's just a matter of who performs that service and where those parts come from. So I think from a dealership's perspective, it's got to be more about, yeah, let's just get it out there. Oh, we need more technicians. Okay, so this is a discussion that's been going on um, since well before the year 2000.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to have a way to address it, and the only way to address it ultimately is going to be put some prestige around the job, put some money around the job, and give those people the respect they deserve and make it a career. Um, all the people that are YouTube influencers right now, if they focused on being a diesel tech, they could make infinitely more amounts of money and then wouldn't be subject to, whatever YouTube decides they're going to do to demonetize them in the future. I mean, it's not an easy job, but it's a job to make a lot of money. But fundamentally, in the dealership, what could they do different? I think from a proactive perspective, I think it's all about the interaction with the end user customer. How do you make it a better interaction with the end user customer, whether it's on electronic parts ordering and having websites? We did this 10 years ago when we set up eParts and ePart Central and Parts Management Central and whatever all the rest of them are called at every manufacturer, which basically was a website that let people look up parts. And then, we brought in electronic parts catalogs so that people could take care of it themselves. Interestingly enough, if you look at the service side of things right now, it has changed probably the very least in the last decade. And how can it change? And that's the question the software suppliers have regularly. Well, we still need to, we need to open up a repair order, and we need to schedule somebody on it. We need to charge parts and labor to it. We need to finish. We need to do an inspection. We need to bill it. It's a pretty straightforward process. I don't think the process is going to change. I think the way you approach the process could change. So let me give you an example, because right now I know I'm just saying stuff you already know, but let me give you an example. Have you played at all with any of the AI chatbots that are out there, ChatGPT or any of these options? Now that a smart university grad, heck, a smart high school kid can actually go in and load their own chatbots. So what they can do is give it a series of reference points to go through. Let's say you're in a dealership that's using DIS software. You can have it go through your work order history so that you can see what the original cause complaint is, what the failure was, and what the correction was. Load it into a chatbot. You can talk to a service advisor, because they'll tell you that of the hundreds of work orders they open in the course of a month, they always lead with the same 5 questions, and they take those answers and they formulate an idea. If you put that stuff into a chatbot, you could get 95% of the process of opening a work order taken care of without having to have a service advisor do it. At the same time, people say, well, where's the customer touch? Believe me, being a customer on the other side, if you can give me an effective and efficient automated system, I really only want to talk to a person when there's a problem. I mean, the goal is to be able to be effective and take care of that. So you say, well, how does that change the dealership? Well, if it used to have 3 service advisors and I could do 20 work orders in the course of a day, if I've got a chatbot doing it, I'm not constrained by how many phone calls I can take or how many service advisors I can get. I'm now constrained about how many technicians I can get and how fast I can get at those work orders. Your previous podcasts told you that there are technicians that can work on those work orders. Yeah. So do you see where all this is starting to join together again?
I think it's interesting, the point that you bring up, which is really about, how do we take the transactional stuff and automate it and really elevate those folks at the dealership to be value add to the customer, truly kind of act as their co-equipment manager, right? And play that role instead of just playing that transactional role in terms of opening the work order and turning the wrench. And I think technology can go a long way in helping to do that, in automating that transaction so we can elevate what the dealer's doing. And to your point, there is capacity out there. We need more, but there certainly is capacity from a technician perspective.
Right. So if you take that if you take that transactional piece of the customer opening up the work order and just say that's step one, step two is to provide the technician with the tools, whether it's through products like Heave, whether it's through other automated applications, or whether it's through something that's supplied by the software manufacturer themselves.
Yeah.
To take the technician and allow him to effectively repair the equipment, document it, and have it electronically recorded and back into a system, and then the final step, and I think all of the software companies right now are trying to say, okay, so how do I turn that completed work order to cash faster? So let's play a game. If you need to get in touch with me, what's the best way? It's a question you can answer. What's the best way to get in touch with me?
I thought it was rhetorical, John.
No, what's the best way to get me? I
Yeah.
mean, you did, right? You and I don't talk regularly. You had to reach out to me. What's the easiest way?
Send an email, text you, call
Send
you.
send in that order. Actually, I'd
Yep.
probably flip it for me, but in that order for most people, right? So it's usually text, then email, then call.
Yeah.
So people need to be looking, and the dealerships themselves need to be able to have this paradigm shift in their mind that says, we want to have regular customer contact, and we have these great CRM applications, and we build all this stuff, all of which I'm in favor of. But it's the fundamental communication with the customer. What's the easiest way to get in touch with that customer?
Yeah.
It's generally nowadays, if they're, listen, I just turned 60 this week, so I'm going to say if you're 60 or less, it'll be 61 and less next year. But if you're 60 or less, primary way to get in touch with somebody is send them a text.
Yep.
I can honestly tell you, I'm out of the country now for 5 or 6 months. There's going to be a lot of mail that's piled up that I'm probably not even going to look at. By the time I get home, it will have aged. Anything important will be on the top, or they will have texted me, called me, sent me an email. But there has to be that next piece that says, okay, so my work order is finished. We've used some fantastic tools to open it, some great tools to correct it. Now it's time to bill it. I need to have that same ability to contact the customer, tell them the work order is done, tell them how much they owe me, and collect the cash.
Yeah.
And there's applications to do it today, but it's just got to be a way that we have to talk to the individual dealers and then talk to the manufacturers and say, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, and I think with that communication, there becomes a level of transparency and visibility in the process, which historically that hasn't always been, right? And you've seen it where it's sort of this opaque thing that your machine goes into the shop and you don't see it again until it comes out the other side. I guess, what are your thoughts on that in terms of giving customers better transparency to the process and better visibility to what's going on, so they can participate, be engaged, and understand the impact that it has on their organization, right?
So I'll agree with almost all the words you used there. So I think transparency is critical. I think the visibility is good. Engagement, yeah, I'll get with it. Participation is where things start to go south. So I think the thing to remember is, let's allow these technicians, the dealerships, the service departments, to be the specialists that they are, but be transparent in the sense that if you go into the operating room, there's still a group of people that can stand in the gallery, and they're allowed to see what happens. I think you will notice that on very rare occasion are they allowed to jump in and participate. They don't get the opportunity from the gallery to say, no, more to the left, you got an artery there. They don't get to do that, right? So I think keeping them apprised of what's happening as it happens is critical. I used a bad analogy where somebody's actually seeing it, but I think the answer would be, back to my text communications again. And I'm giving you industries outside of what we're talking about because we don't have anything that works this well in our industry, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Last week, I took my dry cleaning into a new dry cleaner because I just arrived in a new city, and they said, do we have your phone number? And I'm like, no, here's my phone number. And I gave them my dry cleaning. And by the time I got in the car, I got a letter that said, first of all, welcome to the new dry cleaners. Here's our hours. Here's how we operate. Um, your Here's what you dropped off, and here's when it's expected to be picked up. The next morning, I got a notification that it had been picked up and was at their production facility because they don't actually do the dry cleaning there. The day later, I got, hey, it's back. It's on our rack. Here's the number. Don't forget to come pick us up. Here's the hours. Brilliant, right?
Yeah.
This is where it got really brilliant. I drive to Starbucks Coffee and I drive in front of that dry cleaner to go to Starbucks Coffee. My phone comes up with a proximity sensor that says, we see you're near. It's time to pick up your dry cleaning. Just show them this screen. And that was it. I went to the drive-through, showed them the screen. I got my dry cleaning. I could have driven by there 4 times before I finally went, oh crap, I got to get my dry cleaning. Or I would have been at home going, where's my shirt? Now this is
Right.
the one collared shirt that I have for when I have to go to a funeral, a wedding, or present a podcast, but it didn't make it today. That
Right.
that actually had a collar on it. And the answer is I just keep driving by. But with that kind of, you asked earlier about proactive, with that kind of proactive communication that said, you're in the area, you're driving by, your shirt's ready to be picked up. Now, can you equate that? My question to you is, can you equate that back to the equipment distributorship in the way that they process an order? Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's purely about, getting the right information in the hands of the right person at the right time and then prescribing an action, right? Which I think is the final piece of this is being prescriptive. But the dealer's got to be engaged and involved in those activities that the customer deems important. And I think one of those activities that we found is the act of just inspecting the equipment, right? Which is a broad range of things. It's everything from just walking past a unit on a farm or on a job site and seeing something's wrong and being able to get that information in the hands of the right people, all the way up to doing a very thorough overview, multi-point, multi-hour long inspection for whatever reason or whatever purpose. I guess and customers typically we found have an expectation that their dealers are doing that, right? They're looking beyond the scope of the service job. They're looking at the overall health and condition of the equipment. But I don't always know that dealers have that same expectation that that's part of the engagement that they or part of the unspoken contract that they have with the customer. What are your thoughts on that and the dealer's responsibility versus the customer's responsibility for for the health and the well-being of that asset?
So I get where you're going, and I agree that to do that regular inspection, whether it's a 25-point checklist or whether it's something further than that, every time they see the piece of equipment, every time they do it, for two reasons. One, obviously, is it drives customer satisfaction because you find a key failure before it's a key critical failure. So somebody gets to see that. I think it drives revenue opportunities because you're going to get the business, not somebody else, because you're going to deal with it on your time and your schedule. I think there's a whole customer retention issue because it shows that you do something really important when you do it. So I think it's there and it's critical. I don't think enough people do it. It's funny, I can take you back 25 years ago, and I've been sworn to secrecy, but I'm sure that the people who swore me aren't with us anymore, so that's okay. Of an ag dealership that became extremely lucrative and profitable by doing what they were called ASIs, or annual service inspections. And what they would do is work on a very wide geographic territory. So we're talking, something like half the size of Texas. So they had a huge geography, and they would literally have customers signed up that on a yearly basis, they would take a piece of equipment and provide a detailed inspection of it, and a very detailed inspection. Could be a half-day job, could be a full-day job, just doing a detailed inspection on this. When it was done, they were given a list of items that needed to be corrected, or they were given a clean bill of health. Once the items were corrected and the clean bill of health could be given, they were actually given a sticker that went on the side of the vehicle
Yep.
that said that it had undergone this inspection. it sounds so simplistic, but you have to understand all these customers knew when they bought it. It's like somebody saying it was only driven by a little old lady to church on Sundays. But
Right.
we could validate how this machine was being used and how it was being cared for. It got to the point where combines were trading hands, as is typical in the ag equipment industry. You see it in the construction equipment too, where it changes hands 2 or 3 times. In the ag, it could be 5 or 6 times. In equipment, and you know the longevity of equipment in our industry is way surpasses what we see in the automotive industry, because people will have a machine for 12 years and 20 years and 25 years. Having this slew of stickers running all across the side of it actually, uh, it boosted the resale opportunity
Yeah.
for the customer. So the customer viewed it as a positive. Obviously, there was a proactive sale of parts and labor. It kept everybody busy. It was scheduled. So as opposed to being emergency and you know having to respond and call out mobile techs and things like that, it could be done on a timed basis that made sense. So they could schedule it. And the key to the story is we actually found out they'd had this process running for 6 years and had actually found somebody was actually willing to counterfeit the stickers,
Right.
because they were deemed to be
Wow.
so valuable. They were deemed to be so valuable on a tractor that they actually had to come up with a serial numbering process for the stickers that put them on that would tie it back to the inspection that was done.
Wow.
So imagine yourself showing up at a Ritchie Brothers auction to buy a backhoe loader, and you go on there and find whoever the preeminent service provider was in your area, and he has literally got a sticker on every one of those that shows the service records, because you know the dealer, you trust the dealer, you believe in the process, and you know that in order to get that sticker, that machine was gone over by a technician at least once a year and given a detailed diagnostic and inspection. I can't understand. I'm sorry, I can't understand why every single dealer isn't doing this at some point in the year just to fill the shop, just to fill the gaps, just to remain consistent, just to train new technicians.
Yeah, and I think I even look, there's so many benefits and value to it. And I think one of the things that you just hit on there was, you're basically managing the customer's backlog, service backlog on those assets then. You're creating the backlog, then you're able to manage it, you're able to plan for it. There's so many positives beyond just the immediate. People a lot of times, when we talk to dealerships, they think about that event as, well, we can sell the customer some extra stuff, right, at the point of service. And my point to them is, it almost doesn't really matter whether they buy at that point in time or whether you fix it later. The point is you want to get in a position with the customer to be able to start managing that asset, managing full life cycle that asset from acquisition to divestiture. And by doing that, one, you build a loyal customer, right? Two, because they're going to be happy in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of that asset life cycle, and all the points along the way. If you're helping them manage that asset, and if you're helping them guide them through that full equipment life cycle, it's just something that I think it's just a shift in mindset. So rather than getting the dealer to focus in on these points in time, we're saying to the dealership, no, look at the full life cycle of the asset, which I think is maybe partly your point to say the things you're doing today with the customer and with the asset have it has significant impact on later events like the residual value.
All of it is to manage a lifelong relationship with the customer.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't disagree with what you're saying about that asset, but that asset is a fixed period in time in terms of the customer life cycle. And that customer life cycle is going to be much longer. So if you engage in that partnership on that single asset, you train the customer, and I'm sorry, it sounds harsh, but that's what you're doing is just like we train our partners in life, that this is the processes that we're going to go through. It's not a surprise to the customer. The customer feels vested in the dealership. The dealership is vested in the customer. It's truly, in the 90s, everybody's, oh, it's about business partnerships, and that's great. But this is a true demonstration of an actual partnership where you're proactively managing that equipment for the customer. And the best thing that can happen to you is if you've done this on 3, 4, 5, 10 assets for a period of 2 years, and all of a sudden they decide they're going to look to buy from someone else, their answer is going to be when they come back, geez, we never had a breakdown. Well,
Yeah.
you never had a breakdown because you had breakdowns that were scheduled and planned.
Right.
They weren't emergencies, right?
Right.
We never had downtime. Yeah, you had the same amount of downtime. The only difference was we scheduled it and we arranged it at the most opportune time, not the most inopportune time.
Yeah.
Um, Quite frankly, your parts and service costs should be significantly cheaper if you're doing it on a scheduled and planned basis. I mean, I can offer you discounts on, whatever it was that had to be rebuilt. You got to rebuild an undercarriage. I can rebuild an undercarriage for you significantly cheaper if I have a month's notice than if you come in and say, I need this undercarriage rebuilt and it's got to be done the day after tomorrow. Because I got to machine down parts, I got to pay additional shipping, I got freight. Uh, Forget the fact that I'm jerking people off jobs and everything else. Yeah, somebody's going to pay for it. So it just makes logical sense. The challenge is trying to get dealers to understand and customers to understand this is a long haul relationship,
Yeah.
right? This is an investment now. Because the first inspection that shows nothing, everybody goes, well, I guess we don't need to do inspections,
Right.
right? First time you go to a dentist and he says no cavities, don't go back.
And I think it's about a shared KPI, right? And I think you hit on it too, which is how do we optimize or maximize our planned downtime, right? If that machine's in the shop, we shouldn't be saying as a dealership, oh, we want to cross sell and upsell other things on it. I don't think that's the metric. I think it's how do we maximize our time with this planned downtime, or maybe it's unplanned downtime but it's still downtime that we have an opportunity now to get the most out of it, to recondition that machine, get it back up to spec, change the wear parts, do all the things that we need to do to this machine, and we've got this window of time. And so, if that's our metric as a dealership, I think as a customer, that's a metric you can get the customer on board with as well, and to see the value in doing that.
So here's the challenge though. When you ask why isn't any what why the low adoption rate, why isn't this being done everywhere? And the problem comes back to the software distribution companies. It comes back to the DISs, the CDKs, the eMphasis, the HBS. These guys have a full plate of development that they need to do themselves, and that is on the back office side of things.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they need to look at using APIs, using subject matter experts, using specific applications, hopefully mobile enabled, that can seamlessly integrate with those back end systems that'll allow a team of specialists to take off on that inspection process and then come back and automatically update, the dealer business systems. It's not unlike, and I'm going way out on a limb here, you don't write electronic parts catalogs because there are people that unless you do, in which case, sorry, I just stepped on it, but
Yeah.
because there are people that are particularly proficient, efficient, and experts at writing electronic parts catalogs. Again, the prime software manufacturers aren't writing electronic parts catalogs. They don't write EPCs. What they do is provide a point of integration through a sophisticated set of APIs to do the same thing. So if you start looking at the inspection process, you can be the hub to that process, drawing from resources right from an electronic parts catalog to technician availability through Heave to technician availability and billing information and CRM information from the core customer dealership management system behind. And all of that can be handled through an independent application that doesn't feel like it's disjointed from what's happening in the business system, and it lets the traditional dinosaurs like me in the business system continue to enhance that part of their business and grow. So I really think that's where people have got to start challenging, not you, but challenging their business systems to go back and saying, okay, so what's the core set of APIs that's going to allow this EPC company, this inspection company, this scheduling company, this financing company, Um, I could give you dozens of examples. They were all over the floor at the AED this year. What is your key set of APIs that's going to allow those to communicate back and forth? I think that's the critical piece. And those are the strategic partnerships that you have in the background.
Yeah,
Um,
and what was really nice about the integration that Activate that we just completed with DIS was the fact that we completed a customer workflow. We completed end to end a customer workflow of, to your point, of inspection management. In that case, that was the workflow that needed to be addressed and needed to be attacked. And it was, and from a dealer perspective, they got they're getting the result that they're looking for, which is, how do I tie this whole thing out, right? From, you know, from the act of inspecting a piece of equipment all the way to turning the wrench, opening the work order and turning the wrench in the shop and getting the right parts and then delivering that machine back to the customer. How do I tie that whole workflow out? And I think as we move forward, historically, from a technology standpoint, it seems like we've had lots of folks focus on we want to be the monolithic platform, right? We want to be the platform play. We want to replace everybody else. In the way that I think we move forward is really as an operating system, right? And we think Activate, we think of the world as this equipment management operating system that the customer gets to define, right? Here's my tech stack, here's my dealer business system, here's some point solutions and apps that I use. Well, those things need to be pieced together and connected together in a way that allows them to complete full end-to-end workflows. And as a dealership, then be able to extend that into your customer's organization, right? To be able to your point earlier in the conversation, which was, have a more streamlined communication with our customers, have more visibility, have more transparency, and be able to extend that out into the customer organization. And I see that as a combination of solutions that are getting that done, that both dealers and their customers can kind of seamlessly move between.
I think they have to, because I don't think there's anybody that's positioned, and I'd love to be wrong on this one, but I don't think there's anybody that's positioned to be the Amazon of the heavy equipment industry. I just don't see it. If I was to, in amongst all of my complaining and picking on the dealership management systems, I am well aware what the workload is just to maintain and complete the integration back to the OEM systems. Okay,
Yep.
just what they need from an integration for parts orders and stock transfers and equipment and warranty and all the things that are communication back and forth to the OEM. That in itself is a development is a development project that can consume people.
Yeah.
That's why you don't see new software companies going, hey, we're the preferred solution for Caterpillar. Because if you want to be the preferred solution to Caterpillar and provide all their interfaces, you're going to need 50 technicians in 6 years.
Right.
You didn't build anything else in the business system. All you did was provide for that integration. So it's the same thing. I mean, if you're going to build a car, you got to have somebody who specializes in the engine. You have to have somebody who specializes in the chassis. The same guy that builds the engine seldom paints the car.
Yep.
And I really think it's going to be a unification of whatever the tech stack is. And if that's done through Activate, that's great. The important thing for everybody is to understand that it's one big sandbox and we all have to play in it. So there's got to be some real cooperation. Or in NASCAR, they used to call it co-opetition. You can compete to the point that the competition's over, and then you have to rely on cooperation after that.
Yeah, and I think as part of the reason why we're standing up our integration hub this quarter, and releasing it with 50 plus integration partners, and eventually be hundreds of integration partners on there. And there's overlap for sure. There's always going to be overlap. I always look at that as a healthy thing. For example, we have a equipment management solution for construction companies, right? And we have some time carding capabilities, but there are way better people out there that go way deeper in that area and should. The risk casts of the world. They just had Alec Thompson on the podcast. The busy busies of the world, folks like that. We're not going to go there, but we want the partners that are there, and that really have expertise in that, because that delivers the best value and the best workflow and the best solution for the customer at the end of the day. And I think you're right. It's really about how do we, I'll call it, stand on the shoulder of giants, of all the good work that's already been done, all the groundwork that's already been laid in the industry. And I think at this point, the next wave of advancement is going to be connecting those things, connecting those pipes together in a meaningful way for customers that advances, whether it's an equipment dealer or whether it's a farm or whether it's a construction company, advances their workflows, advances, their business operations.
Yeah, my advice would be, old guy moment coming up. My advice would be, don't forget about the monolithic partners that are still behind there. Don't forget about the people that have these immense databases with years and years of history and the ability to count for every penny that goes through in and out of those systems. That's always my concern, right? It's like building a Tesla and forgetting about the wheel. You still need to have those monolithic systems behind.
Yeah,
To, to
100%. What's interesting is, Caterpillar has DBS, right? Is their
yeah,
core, dealer business system. I think that's fantastic. I don't know that that's going to go anywhere anytime soon. So somebody's done that work so that others can work on and extend those workflows. And I really think that's just critical, because if that weren't in place, then the rest of us couldn't do the things that we're doing, right?
exactly.
If the DISs weren't in place, if the CDKs weren't in place, you know, we couldn't do, we couldn't do half the things that we're doing, or 85% of the things that we're doing.
Well, it's the platform to start with, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the it is it's the foundation, and I don't ever object to having a new and better way. Um, I just think changing out the foundation is often a bigger job than most people expect.
Right. Well, absolutely. It's nice to be able to work on, the paint on the outside of the house and the shutters and the pool in the backyard, um, as opposed to having to knock the whole house down and rip out the foundation and start over.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean fundamentally that's the difference. So
So as I guess as you think about the go forward for equipment dealers, and some of the key things that uh, you feel like they need to advance on or work on, what are those things that come top of mind for you that you would really like to see dealers advance on, and what you think would be big needle movers,
well,
you know whether that's from a tech perspective or just from a business process standpoint.
I think the biggest thing that dealers need to go back and think about is as sad as it sounds, we're in 2024, not 1994, and I really think they need to go back and look very, very earnestly at their customers and what the customer expectation is. And in the dealers that I talked to today, they to have a conversation with the dealer principal, and if you can go 30 minutes without him having check his iWatch or look at his Apple Watch or look at his phone to see what messages he has or to see what urgent communications are coming in. Sometimes they're kind and they just have a separate screen in front of them. So they're sitting there watching, whether it's their private stocks or their equity in their company, or even watching dashboards to see what their movements are on open work orders. It doesn't matter. So I think you need to start expecting people to react the same way you do. And this really is my push to dealers. Like you wouldn't accept it from Amazon if they went 2 days without giving you an update on a shipment notification, right? I mean, I got to be honest with you. I may have a habit of forgetting what I ordered on Amazon if it wasn't for them telling me that, oh, it's going to be here in 2 days, or I have a shipment coming today. Um, so we expect it as consumers. The dealers do it all the time. I guess my question is, why do they think it stops with them and it doesn't translate back to the farmer, the construction company, the material handling organization, the logistics company behind it? So I really think to dealers, if they want to move their needle, they have to start treating people the same way that they're treated by the organizations they like.
Yeah.
It's a, and it's funny because you brought up Alex Kraft and Heave, and the first time I heard about it, I thought this is an absolutely ridiculous idea, Un, which is fine, and I'd be happy to say that to him until I started looking at it from an Uber perspective and started saying, okay, so the thought of me stranded in an airport, just calling some random number and having somebody pick me up and drop me off where I need to drive.
Right.
Listen, when I say it that way, it sounds pretty sketchy. But go stand outside an airport and you'll find that 85% of the people that land aren't getting picked up by friends and family. The rideshare line is 10 times longer than what the taxi line is. I mean, you have to be prepared as a dealer to start looking. I'm not telling you to change your business. Be the preeminent supplier of parts and service and quality equipment to the market you serve. There you go. That's the success metric. The answer is, what are you going to do to distinguish yourself from your neighboring Case dealer, or from your neighboring Komatsu dealer, or from your neighboring John Deere dealer, or from your neighboring Bobcat dealer? What is it that you're going to provide that customer that makes them want to do business with you, not today, but year over year over year over year? And I'm afraid that that's where you've got to find a blend of 1994's we're just going to be here mentality to 2024's we're hanging on by a fingernail. I
Yeah.
mean, you need to find that perfect blend in there. I wish I knew what it was. Excuse me, but I can tell you what it isn't. It isn't waiting for somebody to tell you what to do. It's time for the dealers to start saying, this is what I need.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you guys do when you go in and you explain to them the opportunity of the whole Activate OS, and this is a great concept. I would feel much better if they were beating your door down saying, we need somebody who's going to tie in all of our disparate systems and recognizes the value of each of those, who's not trying to tell me I have to replace all those and go on theirs, because that's the answer, right? If you want something really good, you just have to go on mine.
Right.
All these dealers have good systems. They
Right.
have good systems. They have good partners. But somebody needs to be able to pull all these together. I keep telling dealers they need to challenge, they need to push back, they need to, even if it's those archaic monolithic business systems from decades past, the ones that I worked for, the ones that I helped build. Somebody still needs to be there pushing them at the back, saying, okay, this is how you catch up with this. This is where you catch up with that.
Yeah.
Um, and then the last thing I would tell people is make sure you find people that are invested in your industry. Make sure you find people that understand dealers, that want to understand dealers, that need to know about dealers. First one that sets me off is when people start talking about, well, our company is publicly traded and this is what our share price is.
Right.
Um, as a dealer, I have no interest in what your share price is. What I want to know is what's your customer satisfaction index across all other dealers in the same market spec that I'm in. That's a meaningful number. Right? I don't care what Wall Street thinks about you. I care what my neighboring dealer who's, facing the same kind of challenges I am, or the dealer across the country who carries the same brands who's facing a set of challenges I haven't faced yet. Um,
Yeah.
but I will.
To your point, it's really about repetitions of solving those problems, right? Repetitions of solving, like we talked about the inspection management workflow problem, repetitions at, solving the service delivery challenge, right?
Sure.
Or, the rental workflow challenge or the rental experience challenge. It's just reps at solving those things and maybe coming at them from some from some new and unique and kind of out of the box thinking ways. So it's as you mentioned, like Alex is doing at Heave. There's definitely, to your point, a blend of of how do we blend the old and the new, because there's tons of value in what's been created. And I think it's time to say, okay, well, how do we get a return on that investment? Really, the way I think about it is, these companies have spent tens of hundreds of millions on business systems and ERPs and other tech that they've put in place. And I think that the go forward challenge is then how do we take all of that and how do we harness it and really drive the value, or continue to extend the value out of that.
Yeah, so I'll close with this because you mentioned Caterpillar's DBS or DBSI or whatever the iteration of it is now. I think you would be hard pressed in the construction equipment industry to find a manufacturer represented dealership organization. That's a mouthful, but a cat dealership.
Right.
I think you'd be hard pressed to find anywhere in the industry that stores more valuable data and has more indication of what the future holds for the industry than those dealers today. It's just buried and mired in the data behind the business system.
Yeah.
And I still challenge every dealer. They're sitting on a virtual gold mine of information.
Yeah.
They just need to find the way to utilize it. And I would say the same thing. I'm sorry to come full circle again, but I'd say the same thing about inspections. If I want to get back to inspections again, the secret is I can inspect a machine and know what I'm looking for. I can use this historical database I have because I've dealt with 1,000 combines in the last 5 years, or 2,000 backhoe loaders, or this many excavators, or rebuilt this many undercarriages. I mean, take whatever example you want. The database behind that is so thick and so dense that getting that information out and using it to go through an organized process, you're going to win every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it's interesting because as an example, we have a big joint venture construction project that our software's on, and their operators are using our application to do operator walk around inspections. And this job is doing 11,000 operator walk around inspections a month, right? And you can imagine the data, not just for that company, but all the brands that they're inspecting, all the information that they're finding. If a dealer could gain visibility to that, and we actually have a large Caterpillar dealer who does have visibility into that. So it's a dual-sided solution that we're delivering, one on the cat dealer side and one on the JV side. But the power of that information, and we're just kind of scratching the surface in terms of harnessing that data and harnessing that information. But the power on both sides is remarkable.
Yeah, because you start looking at predictive maintenance instead of preventative maintenance or planned maintenance. It's now predictive. We know what's going to happen. Yeah, and imagine that now multiplied by that by 10 Caterpillar dealers and have them all looking at a data aggregation play back up to Caterpillar corporate.
Yeah.
That I mean, the power ultimately is in the data. The power is in taking the analytics of all of that data and making it meaningful. Challenge is still remains the same. You got to find a dealer who's going to look beyond his P&L and beyond his balance sheet and say, okay, what does my business look like tomorrow?
Yeah. 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 And it's that's a one dealer at a time journey. But I think to your point, it has value all up and down the whole value chain. And we see it, every day, day in and day out, especially, with the Case New Holland dealers that we're working with. We drove over $100 million in incremental parts and service last year just through inspections.
Yep.
And, obviously that has a trickle up effect to the OEM, to CNH corporate. But I think to your point, what's even more powerful for them is the data from that, is the 40, 50,000 inspections that were completed, and taking that data now and being able to do so much with it. To your point, predictive maintenance, suggesting the right parts, even improving going back to NPI and improving product, right? New product introductions. There's so many different ways to take that information and draw value out of it.
So let me give you one acorn that just fell and hit me on the head when you were talking about the construction management project you have where they're doing 11,000 walk arounds of equipment. I assume that's prior to operation that day. The operator makes sure that what he's getting in is safe and prepared and certain things have been taken from. If you took that data, reported it back to the insurance carrier for that company,
Yeah.
um, you're going to see a tangible benefit right there. And I think that I mean I think with the rising cost of insurance, we're going to have to be able to prove back. We're going to have to be able to prove up that says, hey, listen, we're maintaining the equipment, we're doing visual inspections of the equipment, we're maintaining safety standards on the equipment and doing visual inspections. We have pictures of it, we have sign-offs, we have everything else. Insurance companies are going to pay an awful lot of attention to that, and it gives you a position to start negotiating your rates too. So I don't know if you've gone that way or not, but it would certainly be something I would look at moving forward.
Yeah, we've talked to a couple, but you're certainly right. There's insurance, there's financing aspects, there's getting different rates for things, based on the way that you take care of it. From a leasing perspective.
Okay, so I'm gonna call you out at a great place for us to end because you asked me what I would like a dealer to do. I would like a dealer to make the same facial expression that you made for the last 15 seconds. Now, when you go back and play this podcast back, you'll find that you looked up and out the side of your eyes because you were starting to think things differently,
Yeah.
right? Instead of just looking straight ahead and saying, yes, that's an idea. Yes, that's an idea. You literally made that face that said, I'm looking back in my head and trying to look at this from a different perspective. And that's now I've got you self-conscious. You're never going to do it again. But it's actually it's an unconscious movement. You don't realize it. But what you're doing is saying, look, I just did it, right? Okay, so how could you're trying to visualize this some other way than what you're doing traditionally today. And if I had one thing that I could ask dealers to do, look at it differently. Come up with a bad idea. I
Yeah.
mean, really come up with a bad idea because in the root of every bad idea is a good idea. Remember what I said about having a stranger pick you up in a car and drop you off somewhere. That's a traditional bad idea. Having a technician you don't know coming to work on a piece of equipment that you require for your livelihood. From everything on the outside looks like a bad idea. Every one of those bad ideas is the root of something genius that will change the industry.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. 100%. Love it. Love it, John. Hey, John, I 1000% appreciate your time today. This has been fantastic. I'm sure we could probably talk for days, but I know you've got other podcasts to move on to, and it sounds like you're
And apparently now they're going to mow the lawn right behind me.
right. Well, that's actually perfect timing then. It's perfect
That'll
timing.
teach me to be outside.
Right, right. Well, hopefully somebody inspected that lawnmower. No, this has been great, John, and would anytime would love to have you back on the podcast. This has been super conversation, and we probably only touched the surface on a lot of these topics, but yeah, this has been super valuable, I think, for the audience and certainly for me as well. I love talking shop with you, and always learn something for sure.
Happy to help. Reach out to me anytime.
Thanks, Sean. You have a great day. We'll talk
Thanks,
soon.
Brian. Take care.
Cheers.